Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of Genesis, and we are like 2/3 of the way through.
Right.
And this week, so sometimes we do, like last week we only did like 3 chapters or 4 chapters. We have 5 chapters this week. It's a long section, 1 chapter a day in this set.
And some of these chapters can be a little long.
Yeah, but we try to keep the reading, to somewhat short, but there's a lot of stuff going on this week.
And a lot of different stuff,
A lot of moving parts in this week's reading. So make sure that you pay attention to the details. We have some really fun stuff to share with you. And so we do. So where are we at?
Well, okay, so last week the big deal was Jacob finally splits from his uncle.
Yes.
Right. And he returns home with all the wives and kids, the animal and property, and he has to face his brother Esau, who when he left 20 years ago was out to kill him.
Yep.
So how is that going to turn out? And God renames Jacob to Israel. There's a whole wrestling match that happened.
So
in there.
that means that if Israel has children, they become the children of Israel.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go wrestling, but
No,
I wasn't sure where you were going.
No, because that phrase shows up so much in the Old Testament, the children of Israel. I mean,
That's
literally, they are the children of Israel and the descendants of this guy.
Right. We ended the chapter with Dinah being raped and Simeon and Levi slaughtering the men of the town. And that's really where we start. So Jacob and his family had lived in this town in Shechem for 5 to 10 years before the slaughter. Really not a very long time. Now God told Jacob to go to Bethel in Canaan and go right now.
Yeah.
So there's some urgency there. And luckily the surrounding cities were scared of God, so they didn't produce the sons of Jacob.
Yeah. So Bethel, we usually pronounce it Bethel, and that's how our Bibles read it, but Beth means house, and El is God. So Bethel is house of God. And that was, if we go all the way back to chapter 28, Bethel was the place that Jacob saw that staircase, the stairway to heaven. And so it's sort of like a homecoming almost. He's back to the place. Even though he's been here for some years now, God says, I need you to come back because this now we're really pushing forward.
Right. So on the trip, God reaffirms Jacob was going to be renamed to Israel. So pretty soon we'll start referring to him only as Israel.
Yep.
God also told Jacob, be fruitful and multiply. Adam and Eve heard that. Noah heard that.
Yeah.
He's hearing that.
Yep.
And that you are going to be a nation. Not only that, you're going to be a company of nations. So multiple nations are going to be coming from you and will descend from you. And we'll cover part of that in the next chapter. And then God also gives the land back to Israel. So again, it's not the nation of Israel, it's the man Israel and his descendants. So it's reaffirming the Abrahamic covenant and all that kind of fun stuff. So while they were traveling, Rachel gives birth to Benjamin. That's the last one we're waiting for out of the tribe, and then she dies with the delivery.
So she actually did not name him Benjamin.
She did not.
She gave him a different name that was that meant son of my sorrow.
Right, knowing that she was going to die.
She was dying, right. Well, don't forget, Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife, and so now she has these 2 sons, Joseph and Benoni, son of my sorrow. He's like, yeah, we're not keeping son of my sorrow as your name.
Cross that out.
So he renamed him Benjamin,
Right.
Benjamin, which is son of my right hand. And so there's you can still see that favoritism going through there. And so, they set up the grave marker. Another interesting fact that as you're reading this, you're like, that name sounds familiar. Why do I know that name? She died on the way to Ephratah. Well, Ephratah is mentioned in Micah chapter 5. You, Bethlehem, Ephratah, small among the clans, from you will arise one whose goings forth are from everlasting to everlasting. That right there is that name. There's a tie back to Bethlehem and where Jesus was born.
Nice. The next item seems to be a little bit of a throwaway item, but it does have consequences. So Reuben went to bed with his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. That's kind of all we hear right now, but it is going to have some ramifications later.
Well, it wasn't just his concubine. It wasn't just anyone. Yeah. It was Rachel's servant. Yeah. Not his mom's, not Leah's servant. It's Rachel's servant. So he is crossing multiple lines here, especially in Jacob's mind. So that was not a good thing.
Jacob returns to his father Isaac's house, and it's kind of cool because Esau hasn't combined the houses yet, which he shouldn't, but Jacob was still the rightful owner even after not being there for 25 or 30 years. And then we find that Isaac lives to be around 180 years old, and he died after living a full life. It's kind of cool. Esau and Jacob buried him. So I don't know if they're, what kind of relationship there was, but they were both there.
Not unlike when Isaac and Ishmael came back together to bury Abraham. So what's interesting about Isaac living to be 180 years is this finishes the story of Isaac, right? And so we're going to go through the next several chapters, and in our minds, if we don't pay attention, this is why we point out the time markers. If we don't pay attention, it's easy to think, okay, Isaac's dead, now the rest of this stuff happens. Well, and I'm not going to go through the whole math, but you can actually do this because of these time markers that we've pointed out. We know that Isaac was 60 years old when Jacob and Esau were born. Okay, we get that from chapter 25. So if he's 180 when he dies, that means Jacob is 120. Well, we can actually do the math, and we find out that some of the stuff in these upcoming chapters take place while Isaac is still alive. Before Isaac dies. So there's some overlap. So Isaac got to know his grandchildren here, and it looks like, if you lay it all out, that Joseph we will learn here in a couple of chapters, Joseph goes to Egypt, which obviously sets up the rest of the book of Genesis. That happened while Isaac was still alive. So I just want to point that out, that there is some overlap here that we don't always think about if we're just reading straight through, and Isaac dies and then this happens.
It's kind of the cool part to do.
It's worth your time if you haven't thought about this. It's worth your time to work through it. And if you would like me to check your homework, I've put a spreadsheet together a long time ago that helps me keep track of these things, and we can compare notes.
Good. Chapter 36 explores the company of nations, right? So there was a promise that the nation of Israel is going to be through Jacob, through Joseph, but it also seems that Esau was the father of nations too.
Definitely.
Which is kind of wild to think of it that way. So we had already talked about Esau married 2 Canaanite girls, found out his dad didn't like Canaanite girls, so he went out and he married one from Ishmael's family. We find he has 5 sons, 10 grandsons, and then they go into great descriptions on who everybody is and what everybody's doing. I'm not going to cover that part. But do notice that some of these are going to cause the Israelites trouble in the future. So names like the Midianites and the Edomites and the Amalekites. And I put down the struggle between the twins continue. And it just happens.
Well, and let's not forget that all the way back in chapter 25, when Rebekah, Isaac's wife, was having some pregnancy issues, right? She asked God, what's going on here? And he said, 2 nations are in your womb. And now we're learning it's not even just 2 nations, it's a lot of nations. But this is part of the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. God said, I will make you the father of many nations. And we're seeing that.
He also said a number of the offsprings would be kings too. And we definitely see that in this chapter. Your version may say chiefs, but it's chiefs, kings. Could be replaced in there.
One more point while we're here, as we look through some of these names, again, you may recognize some of these names, you may not, and that's fine. But some of these names do show up in the book of Job. So we see in verse 42 here, Chief Teman. Well, one of Job's friends was a Temanite. Okay, and so we're probably somewhere in. We don't know exactly when Job lived, but there's a good chance.
I remember you saying it's around the same time as Abraham and in here.
Abraham to Jacob, I would guess, is when we're going to see the account of Job showing up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 37, like you said, we're now starting our transition and going to be following Joseph, and we'll follow Joseph through chapter 50.
The rest of the book. So this is a little bit, this is a little bit backpedaling into Isaac hasn't died yet. Okay, so we've read that he died, but
Right.
Again, there's some overlap.
So at this point, Joseph is 17. He's got 10 older brothers, one sister, and a younger brother, Benjamin. And Joseph and Benjamin were the only offspring from Rachel, and that Rachel and his dad. And for whatever reason, Israel, his dad, loved Joseph more than any of the others. And that's going to cause a little problem.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Much like his father loved his brother and his mom loved him
Right.
more than anybody else.
Right. So Israel made a special coat or a special tunic for Joseph, and the older brothers hated him because Dad favored him and even gave him the coat.
Yeah.
Joseph had a couple dreams, and he's bringing some of this problem upon himself too. So he's telling the brothers the dreams, thinking, "Isn't this cool?"
Yeah.
When not realizing, no, this is not cool
not
for,
so
for
much,
the brothers. And here's the first two dreams he had. He dreamed that they were in a field. Somebody had taken wheat together and put it together in a sheath, and then you bind that. Whether he put a, I'm sure they just.
Rope
took
of
a
some
piece of
kind or
rope and
whatever.
tied it on
Yeah,
there.
so you've got
So
all
they
these sheaves.
binded it. So you have all these sheaves, and in the middle of the field, and his sheaf stood up or rose higher than the sheaves around him, and in fact, those sheaves bowed down to him.
Right.
So the brothers took it as, "We are never bowing down to
Not
you."
going to happen. Right.
We'll see, they will in the future, but I can see them saying that. And then the next dream, he talked about the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. And that got equated to Israel, the dad, the mom being the moon, and the brothers being the 11 stars. And Dad questioned him about it, but then he kept in mind what Joseph said, too,
Yeah.
which was kind of cool. All right, so one day Israel sends Joseph out to spy on his brothers. Go find your brothers, go tell me what they're doing. And the brothers were shepherding a herd.
Yeah.
So
Which that also means that Joseph wasn't out there shepherding with them. So
Right.
not only does he have special clothes, but he doesn't have to work the same way they do.
Can't get them dirty.
Yeah.
So he does have his special coat on. The brothers saw Joseph coming from far away, and Judah says, "Let's kill him."
Okay, now, there are a couple of things I like here. First of all,
How direct everybody is.
well, there's that. But they saw him coming from a distance, right?
Right.
Did they see him or did they see the coat?
Right. I'm sure they knew who it was.
Yeah,
right?
it's like, also, that's number one. They saw the coat coming, right? Which before he even got there, now they're already ticked off because it's like, why is that guy with the coat?
Right, coming.
Why, he's supposed to be back at home. Number two, in verse 19, they're like, here comes the dreamer. Here comes the master of the dreams, right? I mean, this is tiny
There's
little
jealousy.
insight into what, they
Yeah.
talked about him behind his back, right?
Of course they did. They're brothers.
Yeah.
Of course they did. All right, so Judah's the one that said, "Let's kill him." And then Reuben says, he's really the only one that stands up for Joseph, and Reuben is the oldest.
Yeah.
He said, "All right, let's just toss him into his cistern. Let's not kill him. Let's
Yeah.
not beat him up."
Yeah, and his plan was to come back later
yeah,
and
and
pull him
just
out
get
and
him
send
out,
him
yeah.
home, right? Because everybody they're taking care of the flocks, right? They're going to be moving on soon, so it wasn't a problem.
Right. So the boys took the tunic. They tossed the brother into the cistern, and then they saw a caravan carrying spices, and they knew that it was going to go to Egypt. So they actually sold Joseph to the Midianites for 20 pieces of silver.
Now Reuben was not part of that. Okay, Judah made that call. Let's sell him, and Reuben was not part of that. But when Reuben got back, they're like, "Oh, here's 2 pieces of silver." And he's like, "What's this from?" "Oh, well, we sold Joseph for 20, so here's your cut." He's like, "You did what?"
So now they have to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Right? What are we going to tell Dad?
Yeah.
So they killed a goat. They put the blood on the tunic, and they just showed it to Israel and let him come to
They
whatever.
did not actually say that he was killed by a wild
Very
animal.
careful.
They
If
just
he happens to come to that conclusion, it's not our fault.
and what they asked, it's really funny. It's like,
Whose is this?
we found this, which they did. They didn't say where. We found this. Do you recognize it?
Right.
And yeah, he came to his own conclusion.
Yeah, of course he was distraught. Of course he couldn't be consoled. But it was even worse than that. I mean, this is a huge deal in his mind.
Yeah.
So the Midianites sold Joseph to a guy by the name of Potiphar. He was the captain of the guard in Egypt.
Yeah. Fun fact. So now that group is called both Midianites and
right.
Ishmaelites.
Right, and they kind of do it interchangeably
Back and forth a
couple
little
times.
bit. Yeah.
Right.
So these are family members
Right. Of the other side.
of, I mean,
Of Esau.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Esau's
Esau,
descendant?
but also Ishmaelites. So, like, Grandpa is Isaac.
right.
Isaac's brother is Ishmael.
Right.
These are actually like distant cousins who are they're
Yeah.
doing business with to sell their brother.
Yeah, sure, we'll take it. Right. So Potiphar's captain of the guard in Egypt. And then we come to chapter 38.
Which seems so out of place
Right.
if you're just thinking
Right.
we're going to follow the story.
And that's where you need to pay attention.
Yeah.
Right? So it actually is so out of place, it made me pause.
Good.
Right, right, and that's exactly
should.
what it should have done. Same way last week where we talked about the angels. The angels came back, and then that was it. Or,
Yeah.
That's kind of odd. What are we talking about here? Same way here. It says Judah left his brothers.
Yeah.
And if you page back a couple pages, remember, Judah's the one that said, "Let's kill him."
Yeah.
So one thought process was he's a little guilty now.
I think
and
so.
maybe Dad reacted a lot harder, and he realizes his actions now, and he's having some guilt things.
So in Hebrew, there's a word that just shows that it's called a past time indicator. Sometimes it's translated, sometimes it's not. Okay, and you're reading in Hebrew and you see it and you're like, okay, there's time there. So that shows up at the beginning of verse 1 here, but that shows up all over the place. Here there's another one or two words that are attached to it that are not normally attached to it, and it happened, and the net translates it at that time. So there's something in the context. Remember, the 38 doesn't belong there. So what just happened? Jacob is like, I'm going to go to my grave in mourning. I will never stop mourning my son. And right about that time, Judah left home.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think there is something. Judah knew he was going to hurt Dad. He knew there was going to be some fallout. I don't think he really understood how bad it was going to be.
Yeah.
And Jacob is inconsolable at this point, right?
Right.
And Judah, he's like, I can't do this.
Right.
And so he took off.
Right. So he takes off. He marries a Canaanite girl. She got pregnant and had a son. And in fact, she had 3 sons. Mm-hmm. Then things get complicated. Mm-hmm. So years later, the sons are becoming of age, and Judah acquires a wife for the oldest son. His name is and her name is Tamar. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got that.
Which means we just fast forwarded a lot of years.
Yeah, right.
So
15,
20 maybe, or something. So there's still stuff going back on at home. Jacob is still grieving Joseph all these years later. Right. The other brothers are getting married and doing their thing. So there's a lot of stuff.
Joseph is doing things.
Joseph is still in Egypt or whatever. Right. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background.
Yeah.
While
this is going
on. Yeah.
So was evil in the Lord's sight, and the Lord killed him.
How bad do you have to be for God to just say,
"We're done.
You're dead," and not even mention why, not even tell us what's going on?
Right. Right. And then, as happens in there, and we've talked about this a number of times, Tamar was then given to the second son. Mm-hmm. His name was Onan. And that would allow Er's name to be carried on for the son that they had.
Yep.
But Onan also did evil, so the Lord also killed him.
Yep.
Yeah.
But nobody knows that God is doing this. Judah doesn't know God is doing this.
Right.
Right? Tamar doesn't know God is doing this.
Right.
Nobody knows God is doing this. All they can tell is,
every time I give her to one of my sons,
you marry one of my sons, they die.
Right.
Who are you going to look at? You're going to look at her.
Right. Right. And he has a third son.
And
he said, we're gonna push the brakes here.
Yeah.
So he told her to live as a widow at her father's house.
Yeah.
So basically, put her in exile a little bit.
Yeah.
And with the reasoning, he's not of age yet.
Yeah.
Right.
But what happens when he becomes of age?
Well, after some time. Right. So Judah has either forgotten or all along he was like, "Yeah, I'm not giving her to this third guy."
I don't think he ever intended to.
Right.
I think it was intentional. He's like, "You've killed 2 of my sons," and of course, her thing. I didn't do it. It's like, I didn't do it. So somehow she has to prove she didn't do it.
Right. You are sending me a very nice.
I
Thank you
know.
for that. Thank you.
So what did she do?
So Tamar heard that Judah was coming into the area. So she dresses like a prostitute, covers her face, and situates herself where Judah would see her when she passed by.
Now, to be fair, Judah's wife has died at this point. Okay, so it's not like he's cheating on his wife. It's possible some translations say that she was a shrine prostitute. Okay, so like a temple prostitute. So it could be that because he was going out to shear his sheep and whatever, it was that time of year. So it could be that he decided that he's going to do this, this little prayer thing, right? Pay some money to whatever god was out there and hopefully have a better harvest in his thing. So it wasn't like he was out just looking for prostitutes. There was a business reason for it, but still, she picked up on the fact that he's likely to do this. So she thought this was a good way to trap him.
Right. So they talked, they set a price, and the price was a young goat. And Judah gave Tamar his seal, his cord, and staff as collateral.
Because his flock was way out
there.
there.
He didn't have a goat.
Right.
So after 3 months, Judah was told that Tamar was pregnant. Now at this point, he has no idea that she was a prostitute.
Right. But you know what that proves for her? Is that she slept with him and he didn't die. His sons did,
good point.
but he didn't.
Good point.
Right? So she can prove now, I'm not the one who did it because you didn't die.
Yeah, but he sent for her with the intent of killing her. She sends the seal, the cord, and the staff and says, I'm pregnant by the man who gave these to me. Doesn't even name him.
He doesn't, but right.
He recognizes
He looks
him.
at the ID. He's like, oh.
And then he says, she's more upright than I am because I wouldn't give her to my third son.
Yeah. So here's the thing. She could not guarantee she would become pregnant. Right. So it's not like, I became pregnant, so I have to do. But she somehow had to prove that by sleeping with these guys, she is not the one who's causing their death. Right. That's the only thing she could prove. So she proved it. He's like, okay, you were right all along. I was wrong. He still didn't give his son to her because now, she's got these twins. She's got. I guess you didn't say that yet,
Yeah.
but
That's fine. Right. She gives birth to twins.
The twins,
Yeah,
right? So,
and we think and the chapter ends there.
Yeah.
Now it's rare that we take a right-hand turn, we kind of go down a whole different path, and there's no reason for it. So, I of course had to read the commentary to get the reason, which is okay. But at least trying to figure out what's going on. Why is this here? But Perez, one of the twins, is an ancestor to King David.
Yes.
Which is way cool, and everybody in the Old Testament would be way happy.
Yep.
And then for us New Testament people, that also means is Perez is related to Jesus.
That's
Messiah.
He shows up.
How cool is that?
So he shows up in the Davidic genealogy in the book of Ruth, and then again in Matthew. But you know what that means? That David and Jesus, it's Judah. The scepter is going to come from Judah, Genesis chapter 49, but through a Canaanite woman.
Right.
Because Tamar was a Canaanite, which means that David had Canaanite woman in his ancestry, his blood. So did Jesus. David also had a Moabitess because Ruth was from Moab.
Right.
So we have a lot of this stuff.
Nations of nations.
Nations of nations and nations, and these. Well, we're pure blood Jews or what? Not really.
Right.
You have all these things in your
that's
background.
a very good point. All right, so we end this week. We go back to Joseph. We see what's going on with him. So Joseph was sold to this guy by the name of Potiphar. He quickly moved up into way more important roles within the household. This household would have been big. Potiphar was an important guy. So he had money and he had people.
Yep.
And Potiphar saw that God was with Joseph and he was successful with everything that he did. So he kept moving up and being more in charge and more in charge and more in charge.
Which is really interesting because just 2 chapters ago, Joseph was a jerk. He was immature. He was a jerk. And he didn't seem to have a lot of, shall we say, life experience, right?
Right.
He grew up pretty quickly.
He
gained
did.
some maturity.
But also notice he's still in a household.
Yeah.
Right? He's not out in the field, which wasn't his thing.
Right.
So, it seems like he could more prosper inside.
Yeah. Yep,
So,
that's a really good point.
thing with him.
Yeah.
So Potiphar finally made him overseer of his household, and he was in charge of everything that Potiphar owned. And Potiphar only thought of the food he ate,
Yep.
which is a cool way. But Potiphar was up high enough that he had to worry about poisons,
Yeah.
and dying.
Yeah.
It said that Joseph was well built, good looking, and unfortunately, Potiphar's wife was hitting on him.
Yeah.
And being in the household, they would be around each other an
Yeah.
awful lot. And Joseph kept refusing, saying, "How can I sin against God?" Which is awesome. He's bringing God into the picture.
Yep.
She continued to hit on him. He continues to refuse. Finally, so one day there was an altercation. She grabbed his tunic or whatever he was wearing, his outer
Not
garment.
the nice one that his dad
his
gave him.
outer garment.
Twice now, his coat has gotten him in trouble.
He takes off running this time because he doesn't want to be thrown in a cistern. But that gave her the ability to cry. He tried to rape me. I screamed, and Potiphar, of course, believes his wife.
Yeah.
And he throws Joseph in jail.
Now, if Potiphar is the captain of the guard, or I like to think of him as the chief of the secret police, or he's close to Pharaoh, the king, right? So this isn't just county jail that Joseph gets put in. This is like the
bad jail.
This is like political prisoner
It's the place
type.
the emperor sends people. The double secret place.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that some commentators think that the way it was set up is that this jail would have been like in Potiphar's basement, like near his house. It wasn't just, downtown county or whatever.
Right.
This is close by, which means that the jailer, the warden, worked very closely with Potiphar. These were high security type prisoners. Potiphar was down there regularly, I'm sure. They knew each other really well, which means he probably knew Joseph really, really well. What are the chances that Joseph hadn't been down there working with him or whatever in the past? Now Joseph is in prison.
Right. And that explains the next part. God showed favor to Joseph, and the prison warden liked him.
Yeah.
So the prison warden started to recognize Joseph's strengths and started giving him more and more authority within this prison.
So if the prison warden knew Potiphar and knew Joseph, probably also knew Mrs. Potiphar.
Right.
And so if Joseph goes down there and says, "I really didn't do it, she was hitting on me," jail warden is probably like,
I know what you mean.
yeah.
But yeah, that's a very good point. Which would explain, because we don't know how much time is passing here. We have a hard time with time here. So for the prison warden to give him that much authority in a seemingly short amount of time would be odd.
Yeah.
Unless he did know him.
Unless he did know and know the situation. I also would think that if Potiphar himself
Truly believed it.
truly believe that, I mean,
he would
you're
kill
going
them.
to kill. I mean, he's a Hebrew slave. Why are you? I mean, no matter how trusted you are, you don't do that in my house, right? So maybe even Potiphar knew that there was probably something to it, and to save face, he had to throw him into prison.
Well, and I'm sure he had to go back to Joseph. Hey, where'd you put my? Because he knew where everything was. too.
Right. And it could be that even he told the warden, "Take care of this kid."
Yeah. So a lot of things.
There's a lot of potential, and I know I'm doing a lot of speculation there, but when you just read through it, there are too many. It's like, I think everybody knew Mrs. Potiphar, and this isn't the first time this happened, probably, right?
So this is where we end up this week. Joseph is in jail, and we are going to continue to follow along him for the rest of the 50 chapters.
Yeah, but the last verse really, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a bad thing. Oh, he's in prison, whatever. But the Lord was with him, and whatever he was doing, the Lord was making him successful.
Yeah.
So this is
Maybe not a happy
positive-
time, but it was positive.
Yeah, there's something really good going on here. Well,
Good. A lot of ground.
yeah, a lot of ground covered up, a lot of years and some ins and outs here. So again, take it slowly. If you want to map things out, just so that you can see if that's the way your brain works, map some things out so you can see how some of the overlap goes. It really is a fun exercise, and it helps you put the picture of Genesis together a little bit better. It certainly helped me. If you have questions, or if you have some things that you'd like to point out to us, like we point things out to you, we'd love to hear those. Send those in, and either on our church connection form or in the comments below, depending on where you're watching this. and we'd love to hear those and answer your questions. We will pick up here. We are 80% of the way through the book, and we are coming into the home stretch for the next few weeks, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye, everyone.